So a couple of years ago, I want to say like 2 or 3, me and my friend were bored. This was around the time that the Ouija board trend was going around on YouTube, and that kind of stuff has always, and still does, fascinate me. So we both decided to make a Ouija board out of a rectangle of cardboard that we cut off of a box. I believe we also made a ghetto-looking planchette out of cardboard too, with a hole cut out of the middle and everything. So anyways, we brought the thing into the basement of my house. Already a huge mistake, as I learned after. And we started messing around and using it. I don't even remember what we asked it or anything that really happened in detail, but I do remember being in such shock because I felt a strong connection, almost like a magnetic pull, pulling it down and moving it from underneath. Another thing that we both admitted to feeling after we played with it for a couple of minutes was a cold chill, only on our arms, that we were playing with. It wasn't really a breeze, but it just felt, well, bone-chilling. The point of this story comes into play now. That night I was in my bedroom, and I got up to go to the washroom, which is straight across the hall from my room, to brush my teeth and get ready for bed. I left my phone on my bed before leaving. So after I was done getting ready and all, I opened the bathroom door and immediately noticed that my room's lights were turned off. This threw up a red flag in my mind right away, and while I was scared, I just thought it was nothing and flipped the lights in my room back on. I went to grab my phone to distract me from the adrenaline and try to calm me down before bed, and I didn't see it on my bed. Or anywhere, for that matter. I got creeped out, and immediately flipped the lights off and jumped into bed and hid under the covers. I tried to fall asleep, even though the thought that the Ouija board we had used earlier that day was in the closet about 5 feet away from me would not leave me alone. I swear I heard a faint knock from inside my closet multiple times that night, but maybe it was just my mind messing with me. The next morning I wasn't as scared or freaked out as I was the night before, and I got up to take a shower. Once I got out of the shower and stepped out of the bathroom, my phone was right there, on the floor, right in front of me. To this day, it still troubles me, and I have no idea what happened that night. I haven't touched the cardboard Ouija again, but I did purchase a legit Ouija board like 3 months later, and have not really had any outstanding experiences with it, like I had with the cardboard one. It's been 4 or 5 years since my last encounter. I think I'm safe, right? Wrong. I moved last year and I recently thought, hey, remember those kids a few years ago? Funny, they can't get you now. Boy, was I ever incorrect. I live on a mountain, and like an hour away from the beach in a super populated neighborhood with my roommates. 2 chill lesbians and a college dude. Super cool people. I think nothing can hurt me now, because there are people everywhere. But no, I'm stupid and jinx myself. I was home 2 days ago. Class was canceled, and the dude of the house was home too and taking a nap. I'm in the kitchen watching Netflix and doing homework when there's a knock on the window. Obviously, this is weird as hell, but I have weird as hell friends. Maybe one of them are trying to scare me. I brush it off and continue what I was doing, and then it happens again. Once again, I brush it off because maybe it was the snow if it wasn't one of my friends. Things like this happen all the time with them. Well, it goes on for about 10 minutes, and I'm kinda starting to freak out. My friends don't have this much patience. I go to Charlie's room, the guy, and wake him up. I'm not the one that's usually riled up, so he's concerned too. We both go to the window. I have my phone out with the camera and 911 within a touch, and Charlie has a bat. We look out the window, and no one is there. After a minute, we calm down and go and sit in the living room. Charlie's mom is a cop, so he says he'll tell her about it later. We think we're okay, so we chill and watch TV together. 30 minutes later, the doorbell rings. I go and open the door. At first, I don't see anything. Then, down on the bottom of the stairs of the apartment, I see 3 young boys dressed in black hoodies, jeans, with brown or black bangs. At first, I didn't move. I was frozen in place. Then Charlie asked who it was, and I came to my senses and got a good look at the kids, then slammed the door shut behind me. I started bawling, and I mean sobbing. I had no clue what to do. Charlie's freaking out because I don't cry, especially in front of people like that. He ran to the door with the bat that we have on the windowsill and looked outside. He saw them too. He started freaking out because he didn't know what to do, so he started yelling at them to leave. He said they started smiling. I was crying even more now, and he was still screaming, and I think the neighbors wanted to call the cops. Now think about this. He didn't know what they were. He thought they were normal kids that had scared me. He didn't see their eyes yet. I started yelling at him to go inside when I hear a bunch of footsteps running up the stairs and Charlie screams and runs in. He's telling me he saw their eyes and that they were black, and now we're both freaking out and grabbing kitchen knives. Eventually we calm down and look outside again. No one's there, but we can see a group of kids past the complex with 3 that we think might have been the BEKs. I told him about the other thing that happened to me, and now we're scared to be in this house. We told the other roommates, and they thought we were high or something, so once again, no one believes me. This happened about 3 days ago, and I've been on edge ever since. I'm a 14-year-old girl, but when I moved into this house, I had just turned 12. The house was fine, and was very quiet since before this I had lived with a ton of family, but now there were only 4 of us. We moved in the day after Thanksgiving, and it felt great to have my own room that I didn't have to share with any cousins or siblings, so I spent a lot of time up there basking in my newfound alone space. Let me emphasize this. When we moved in, I felt nothing. No presence, no spirits, nothing paranormal, nothing off. That is, until December rolled around. The first week of December is when I felt it for the first time, like I was being watched by something. Like when someone stares at you in public, and you have that instinct to look at them, that's how it felt. I always felt watched in my room, to the point that I hated being alone up there, and spent all my time in the living room or in my parents' or brother's room. The first week goes by, and I try to ignore the feeling. I chalked it up to me being paranoid because it was a new house, but still, the thoughts stayed in the back of my mind. Finally, I told someone who may have answers for me, my aunt. She's my mom's sister, and she has always believed in the paranormal for as long as I can remember. She got me into it for a while before I stopped believing. I believe again now, because this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. She explained that it was probably a nice spirit watching over the house and, hopefully, me. I hoped that was the case, and in a way, it was. Over time, I would feel it any time I entered my room, and especially when I was trying to fall asleep. It creeped me out so much, and I just wished that it would go away. Then it went from watching me to making contact. One night I was home alone because my brother and parents were visiting Santa, and I didn't want to go that year because I felt sick. I was in the kitchen making hot chocolate when I felt breathing on the back of my neck. It was hot and made my hair stand up. I froze in fear and stood there until the microwave went off. When it began to beep, the breathing faded away as if whatever were there had just walked off. I made the hot chocolate and sat on the couch. I was so freaked out that I was just there staring at the TV in shock until my family got home. Worst part is that I could still feel something staring at me, and this time, it wasn't in my room. Finally, the week of Christmas came, and the excitement made me forget about the incident prior until it happened again. Me and my mom were hanging out in the kitchen when she turned around to answer a question that my brother had asked her. I felt the hot breathing on my neck, and this time it stayed there longer. I froze again, unsure of what to do. I panicked and got up and went over by my mom, who was very confused. After that, I felt the breathing constantly, even on Christmas while opening gifts. It lingered. I finally got fed up one day while sitting in my room. It became less scary and more annoying. I said something along the lines of, "Stop breathing on me," and it stopped completely, and I was shocked. I didn't think it would actually work. After that, I began to have the same dream, but slightly different, every single night. It would begin with me at some park that I've never seen in my life, and me and this boy sat on a bench together. We would begin to talk, and it was actually quite peaceful. We would just converse and stare around at the people walking by. He had brown hair and brown eyes, and was really tall compared to me. I'm about 5'4", and he was like 6 feet. The dream would end, and I would never remember anything we talked about, just that it was a good dream. Flash forward to right after Christmas break, a friend, let's call her Danielle, came over to spend the night. We both heavily believed in the paranormal, and she decided because of this whole watching and breathing thing that she would bring her Ouija board. I had always heard different things about them, but decided it was worth a try. We began talking to the thing that watched me, and the reason I knew this is because it always had this very specific energy. I knew it because, like I've said this whole time, he was up my butt. We first asked what his name was, and he replied, Nolan. I was pretty shocked that the board actually worked, and I was pretty mesmerized. I then asked if he was the boy that I talked to in my dreams, and again, he said yes. I was pretty happy that he was nice, because before, I was quite terrified that he was a demon that wanted to eat my bones, but was relieved when it was just a 15-year-old boy. He then said he doesn't like summer and prefers winter, which explains the only appearance being during winter months. Cut to next December, the watching and breathing had stopped during March through November until it began again, only this time stronger. He began screwing with me. He would open cupboards that I had just closed, or move things that I put in specific areas, only to find them in strange places far from their original area. I always knew that this was Nolan, who I had begun to call Noel. Time went on and the dreams became more vivid, and I remembered the conversations that we had, and it was still nice. Nolan became a good friend, even though I couldn't see him. That December came and went, and now we cut to this year. This is where I wish that Nolan never existed. So because of financial issues and other problems, my dad's family had to move in, my grandparents, aunt, and cousin. And me and that cousin were never super close. I'll call him Connor. Connor was super annoying. He always made messes that he never cleaned up. He never did chores, never did or went to school, and would do stupid stuff for attention, yet he always got what he wanted. By now, I'm 14 and Connor is 12. December rolls around and I'm excited to talk to Nolan. Me and Danielle are still friends and do weekend Ouija sessions with him. So we're home alone, me, Connor, and Danielle, and we decide to introduce Connor to Nolan. So we set up the candles and everything and begin. Things are going smoothly, until Connor starts calling Nolan names. He was saying some pretty mean stuff too. Me and Danielle were trying to get him to stop, but nothing was working until Nolan got really, really mad. Doors began slamming open and shut. Cupboards were going nuts. Our TV was flickering channels, and the windows sounded like someone was beating on them. Finally, I looked into the doorway to the hall, where everyone's rooms were besides mine, and there was a tall figure standing there, not moving, as everything went haywire. I screamed and said goodbye, standing up. Danielle was yelling for Nolan to stop, and Connor had begun to cry. Finally, I screamed for him to stop, that he was scaring me, and the figure disappeared, and the cupboards shut along with the doors. The banging stopped, and I just sat on the floor sobbing. Danielle wasn't crying, but I was terrified and just stood there silently. Connor didn't say anything either, but continued staring at the floor with tears in his eyes. Finally, our parents got home, and me and Danielle went to my room while Connor went back to the basement where he stayed with my aunt and grandpa. Danielle had fallen asleep, but I couldn't, so I began talking out loud as I felt Nolan was in the room. I started saying how it wasn't okay that he had really scared me, and I felt the breathing on my neck. Finally, I fell asleep, and things were fine. I dreamt about him again, and all was normal. About a week after that, Connor wanted to talk to Nolan again. Apparently, Nolan was giving him nightmares, ones where he was chasing him throughout our house, trying to kill him. Nolan would scream about how Connor needed to leave me alone and stop bothering me, or he would kill him. Connor was obviously terrified, and wanted to say sorry, I guess. I'm not sure, but me and him sat down with Danielle's board, which she had left the week prior, and we began to talk with him. Nolan kept spelling out things like murder, angry, and my name over and over again. Our candles went out and knocking began on the window behind me. It went very slow at first, just a simple knock, knock, knock. Me and Connor froze. I couldn't move and I didn't want to turn around. Finally, I told Nolan that I was scared and that he needed to leave Connor alone and stop. The knocking stopped, and the board spelled out, sorry, then, Connor bad. After that, Connor decided to call it quits and go to bed. I decided to go into my room and try to talk to Nolan again. I started by being nice and asking him to knock once for yes, two for no, something that we usually did. But he got angry fast. He started to bang on my walls at the mention of Connor. My lights went out, and so did my TV. The banging was loud, and if I'm honest, it was terrifying. He was throwing my pillows and banging on my windows, like the night that Danielle was here. I was crying so hard that I could barely breathe and was hyperventilating and sobbing so hard that I could barely talk. Nolan stopped after I let out a strangled cry for him to leave me alone. After that, he stayed away, for a day at least. The next day I woke up, and the Ouija board sat in the middle of my room. I kicked it hard and walked downstairs. I was eating at the kitchen table talking to Connor about the night before. He said he had another dream about Nolan, except it wasn't a nightmare. It was exactly like mine in the park. They talked. I'm still confused about why Nolan would do this. I felt breathing on my neck while eating and basically told Nolan to screw off. I was still mad at him from last night. He did pretty quickly. I didn't feel him for a while, until last night, when Danielle came over for a sleepover and I decided to talk to Nolan. He obviously wanted to talk, so he sat up in my room, and he came through faster than I've ever seen. Now what happened next is what I really need some answers for. We began talking and he spelt out sorry, but then he did something I've never seen him do. He spelt out love, and I honestly don't know what that means. He would emphasize it, and barely answer any questions after that. Danielle then made the mistake of bringing up Connor. Nolan got pretty mad and started to bang on the walls again. I yelled at him to stop, and he did. I didn't say anything after that. Today I called my aunt for advice. She said he may just be an overprotective spirit, but I'm not sure if that's the case here. I don't know if Nolan is bad or not. He isn't to me, but he is to Connor and sometimes even Danielle, but never to me. All I know is that I won't be talking to Nolan for a while, a really long while. And even now, while typing this out, I can feel his breath on the back of my neck. I woke up this morning to some disturbing news. My wife and I sleep in different rooms, mainly because I snore a lot and I also toss and turn due to spinal issues. It works out best for us. Lately, I've been going to bed around 4 a.m. since I'm out of a job and I prefer the quiet of the night. My wife usually gets up anywhere between 5 to 6 a.m. if the cats are bugging her to give them a little something until feed time. Don't ask me why, it's just what she does. Anyway, this morning after I woke up, she said as she walked past my room, she saw a shadow figure sitting on the corner of my bed, staring at me, and that my iPod was on. She also said she knew I was sleeping because I was snoring. Now, I usually watch something on my iPad before going to sleep, but I also keep my door mostly closed so that the light from the iPad doesn't disturb her. If she saw me, it means the door was open, as it would have been impossible otherwise. Now, that part doesn't disturb me too much. We have 4 cats, and it's not out of the ordinary for them to push the door open. What I know 100% for a fact is that I had the door mostly closed, and the iPad was definitely in sleep mode. I always put my iPad in sleep mode and then put my phone on the charger prior to going to sleep. My door creaks, so I would have heard it open if I were still up. This is disturbing to me because it isn't the first time a shadow man was spotted by my wife, and I spotted one before meeting her. Back in either 2008 or 2009, I was living in my first apartment. I had the scariest experience of my life. I woke up sleeping on my chest, which I never do, and I found my entire body was paralyzed. The only thing I could move was my eyes. Out of the corner of my left eye, I could see a shadow figure approaching me. I tried screaming, but nothing came out. I started to panic, and before I could do anything, everything went blank, and I woke up in the morning. I usually forget most of my dreams, but this event is scared into my brain. The last bit of information I want to share is something that seems odd to me, but I don't really know how to explain it. It's only happened twice in my room over the last 3 years. What I've seen is this strange, tan-colored dust that appears out of nowhere in a small area. The 2 times it happened, it wasn't in the same area, and oddly, the areas around the dust only have the typical normal dust buildup. I've checked the ceiling to see if anything came out from there, and found nothing. It's strange to me because, while I'm not a clean freak, the amount of dust makes it look like it's been building up over months, which, for that, wouldn't be the case. This may have had nothing to do with anything, but I thought it was worth mentioning. I've watched documentaries on sleep paralysis and read some medical reports. I don't know if it is or isn't a medical condition, but what gets me is that people from all over the world with various beliefs have experienced the exact same thing. Always the inability to move one's body, and always a single or multiple shadow figures. I was about 17 when this happened. I moved in with my father after living with my mom for most of my life. Behind his house is a trail in between our house and the neighbor's house. It's pretty unbeaten, but you can still find your way through it. At the end of the trail, there's a very small pond. The first time I walked back there, I found it very charming, until I turned my head to see a small porcelain sculpture of a boy sitting on a log. The paint had faded from years of sitting there. The shirt was still slightly colored, but the thing about the paint that bothered me most was his eyes. They looked so blank. But the most important detail to the story is the hands, or the lack thereof. His hands were nowhere to be seen. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just a forgotten decoration put there by the neighbor long before I had arrived. The pond behind my house afterwards is where I would go and smoke weed while my dad was home. The sculpture never bothered me too much. That is, until the day that I touched it whilst I was walking around. I walked to the very back of the pond and further into the woods, and found a small, wooden, decrepit shack. I wasn't about to waltz in there and get shanked by a weirdo, so I left it as is. but I got a really sinister feeling from it when I turned my back to it. When I was making the return trip, I had to slightly lean on the sculpture as to not fall into the pond. When I say I've never felt something so sickening and evil, I mean it. I immediately let go and sat back in the small chair that I had set up and began to smoke, thinking I'm just being paranoid. Then, as I finished my bowl, I feel something tug my hoodie slightly, so I jerked my head to see. Nothing there, and I just brushed it off as a branch or something, so I took a deep breath, leaned back in my chair, and looked up at the stars, leaving my arm dangling down off of the chair. Then I felt a small, cold hand wrap its fingers around my index finger. I nearly shit myself, jumped up and sprinted back to my house, leaving all my paraphernalia at the pond. Keep in mind, it's about 9 or 10-ish, so I'm tripping over branches and vines until I found myself back on my back porch. From there, I could hear several twigs snapping and footsteps crunching pine straw heading back toward the pond. I haven't been back since, and I'm not planning on going. Between that old shed and the small, handless sculpture, the whole area gives off bad energy that thankfully I don't think I've brought into my house. I was raised to understand and live in harmony with the paranormal. There were a lot of spirits and odd happenings surrounding me when I was younger. I've never really liked being alone in the dark, but I don't remember being afraid of anything supernatural until one night. I was about 13, and we had recently moved into my aunt's old house. I immediately disliked the house, and especially my room. They just felt wrong. Still, we set everything up. We put my 4-poster bed against the wall in such a way that my headboard was in a corner, and my footboard sat right against the light switch. So if I laid on my bed and looked down, I saw the light switch, doorway, and top of the footboard. I had a big window to my right, with a street light just outside it. My bedroom door wouldn't close and the hallway light stayed on. Anyway, I started to see shadowy figures during the day and night, but that was pretty normal. I woke up a few nights to tiny footsteps and cackling. I assumed they were goblins being annoying. I always felt watched. The first night something seemed wrong, I woke up hanging halfway off of my bed. I couldn't see any light or figure out how I was even laying. Finally, I found my footboard. I reached out much further than the switch should have been and turned on the bedroom light. As soon as I touched the switch, I could see the street and hallway lights again. About 2 nights later, I woke up just in time to see a dark figure appear over my footboard. It looked like a man's head and shoulders with thick black material draped over it. There were no facial features, and the blackness continued like it had a body, but no arms or anything. When I think back, it reminds me of the Dementors from Harry Potter, but it slithered up over my footboard. I could feel the weight, and I could move, but it seemed like a bad idea. So I closed my eyes. I felt the weight continue up to my chest, pause, and disappear. I opened my eyes, and it was gone. I felt strangely better in the house after that, and I haven't seen it since. It was still one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had. I don't know what it was, or who it was looking for. I totally forgot about this happening until my mom brought it up at dinner tonight, and now it's 9:30 at night and I'm scared all over again. This was back in high school, either my freshman or sophomore year. I missed the bus, and I didn't have a car at the time, so my mom had to drive me to school. The road my tiny neighborhood, more like a glorified cul-de-sac, was off of was a long stretch that had only one equally tiny other neighborhood and a few houses here and there. It was 6 a.m. or something and still dark outside, and it was colder than a witch's tit. As we were pulling out of the neighborhood, my mom and I both saw these 3 children in blue and white private school uniforms standing side by side, shoulder to shoulder at the entrance of the neighborhood on the sidewalk. It was either 2 girls and 1 boy or 2 boys and 1 girl. I didn't remember the ratio, but the girls wore a blue and white skirt/dress outfit and the boy wore a blue short-sleeved shirt with khaki shorts. This was weird for a few reasons. 1, it was 40 degrees outside. They looked like they were dressed for the summer, and they didn't even wear coats or anything. Secondly, there were 2 schools in the area, but not a private school till the next town over, and the blue and white weren't the school's uniform colors. Third, what young kids just stand there in a single file line not doing anything but staring? No joshing around, no nothing? Yeah, right. Lastly, this wasn't where the bus stop was. It was a few blocks down. Just a sprinkle of extra creepy on top. There weren't any streetlights. They were just standing there in the dark, not doing jack except for being creepy as hell. They were on the corner on the right, closest to the passenger side where I was obviously sitting. And of course, we were turning right. As we got closer, I thought that at first they didn't have faces, but it was just too shadowy and dark out, and the headlights only shone under their shoulders, which is how I can remember the outfits so vividly. Then we got closer, and I was relieved to see that they did have faces, but then got completely freaked all over again when I saw that their eyes were all black. Like supernatural Sam and Dean fighting demons, all black. My mom saw it before I did, and she put the pedal to the metal and hightailed it out of there. I remember trying to look back and see them, but I couldn't since it was too dark. My mom didn't go back home until the sun rose, and it was bright enough to not be afraid anymore. Of course, no one believed me at school, and my siblings thought we were just full of it, but we know what we saw. We never saw them again after that, though. I thought that they were spirits, but after a few months, I heard about the black-eyed children on YouTube, or something that made the connection. We moved shortly after that due to unrelated reasons. This was 3 or 4 years ago, and I had blissfully forgotten all about it until my mom said, "Hey, remember when?" And now I want to die. I hope that my irrational anxieties and fear around children that are small enough for me to punt across the soccer field is amusing at least. I'm a logical person, and I do consider myself a skeptic, even though I know what I saw, and I know that it really happened. Maybe it's just that I tend to be skeptical about most things. I will, as briefly as I can, describe a little history of the house and the changes my family made to it, because I believe that it applies to what I experienced. I'm originally from a small farming town in Washington State. My parents bought a ranch-style house in this town in the early 1980s, and we lived there until early 1993. The house was built in the mid-1950s, and was known as a party house in the 1970s when my parents were in high school. My parents did a lot of work on the house, as it was a little run down when they bought it. There were many holes punched in the walls and doors. The original hardwood floors were in rough shape, and the family room and original master bedroom had disgusting, torn, brown and lime green shag carpeting. The original master bedroom also had wood paneling on the walls. We tore out all the paneling and replaced the horrifying shag carpets with vinyl and new carpeting and renovated the bathrooms. The main change that my parents did to the house was they added a new master bedroom to the back of the house and converted the old master bedroom to a large laundry room / sewing and crafts room for my mom. The new master bedroom was added onto the other side of the master bedroom from the original master bedroom turned laundry room. I include all of this because during college, I mentioned what happened in this house to a friend of mine who was really into the paranormal, and he suggested that the renovations my parents did, in combination with it being a former party house where there had been drug use and possibly violence, had stirred something up. So one side of the house was set up as follows, from front to back. Family room, the new laundry room, the master bathroom, then the new master bedroom at the back. The kitchen was to the right of the family room if you were facing the door to the laundry room, and could be partially seen from the family room. Now, to my experiences. The Void Man. I do not know how old I was when I first saw it, or how old I was when I last saw it. I lived in the house until just before my 8th birthday. I was between 5 and 7. That much I do know. I mostly saw it when I was in the family room. It would stand perfectly still in the doorway from the family room to the laundry room. It seemed to be staring at me, but it had no eyes. It was a pitch-black void in the shape of a human. There were no discernible facial or other body features on it. It was a body with a head on top. The outline of the body appeared to be slightly fuzzy or misty. I would say it was over 6 feet tall. I should also mention that no one who lived in the house was that tall. My mom was maybe 5'3", my dad is 5'7", and my brother was a toddler at this time, so it couldn't be me misremembering any of them. I would just stand there and stare back at it. I felt frozen and didn't know what to do or say. I felt like I couldn't speak if I wanted to when it was there. I remember feeling a sinking sensation when I saw it. I have one distinct memory of staring at it in the doorway to the laundry room, and I could see my mom working in the kitchen. She was standing at the stove and could have seen it if she had turned her head to her right. She did not notice it. I named it the Void Man at some point. Staring at it was like staring into a deep void, a void that would swallow me up. I don't remember feeling fear exactly when I saw the full shadow person. It was more that I couldn't feel anything. That was not the case for the other way that I would see it. It would like to peek its head around the door frames at me. It would do it several times in rapid succession. That would terrify me. I think that was its intention. I would usually go running off to my room or to go find my mom. I only ever saw the full body of the Void Man from the family room looking into the laundry room, but it would peek its head out at me from both of the laundry room doors, the one leading into the family room and the one leading into the master bathroom. If my parents ever saw anything, they had never mentioned it, and I have never mentioned it to them. I'm sure that there are those out there that will say, well, you were very young, you must be remembering wrong, or you made it up at some point and then it became real to you over time. I wish this was the case. I really do. But I remember the Void Man very vividly. I know that I saw this thing, whatever it was. We moved out of that house in 1993 and moved into one that we had built. I have never seen anything like what I did in that house ever again, but the experience has followed me my entire life. I have a nervousness about open doors, and what I might see on the other side. I was 13 years old, 2003. My friend and I were bored and decided to have some weird fun. Now, I've always had interest in supernatural and occult-like things. I've always been very empathic and in tune to things in a way that's hard to explain. Anyways, I didn't have a real Ouija, so we used paper and drew one, and then used a quarter for the planchette. We asked if anyone was there and if they wanted to talk. Of course, there was nothing for a few minutes. Suddenly, the feathers of my dream catcher in my room started to sway. No open window or AC on. We asked again if anyone was there, and then it felt like there was a pull. We allowed ourselves to let go and just see what happened. It went to the yes. We asked what its name was, and we felt pulled towards D and C. Just those letters, D, C. Odd. A minute or so later, my grandma called for us that she was ready to go, as we were about to go to the mall. We stood up and walked out of my room. My friend looked at my face and gasped and told me to look in the mirror. I had about a 2-inch scratch on my face that was not there before. We were a little freaked out, but mostly confused. We went shopping and my grandma asked what had happened, and I told her I really didn't know. The next morning, the scratch was gone. After that night, however, things got pretty bad. My room for some reason started to feel colder than the rest of the house. Even my grandma commented a few weeks later that my room was, quote-unquote, cold as death. My dog stopped coming into my room as well. He would stand at the doorway and I would call for him and he would just look at me and leave. He might come in rarely for a minute or so, but he would never stay. I started to get feelings like I wasn't alone. The air felt thicker, the dark seemed darker. When I was home alone, I would hear things, footsteps and creaking. One night, it all came to a head. My grandparents went out to dinner and I stayed home. I was downstairs playing on the desktop and instant messaging my friend. The bathroom door next to me had been shut tight, but made a clicking sound. The knob had turned, and the door had opened slowly. I got up and slammed it shut. I went back to playing my game and instant messaging when I heard a loud crash. I got up and saw my grandparents' crucifix that had been hanging on the wall, on the floor. I put it back and turned on as many lights as I could, and the TV, and just took my mind off it all. Around this time, my grandma, who is very Catholic, started getting into more New Age things like crystals and psychics. She went to one and the psychic told my grandma that she had a granddaughter who saw orbs, but that these orbs I had been seeing were angels protecting me. It is true that I had been seeing a lot of flashing lights that I called orbs in those months. Fast forward a year or so, and some things happened to me that I won't go into here. Depression and hospitalizations and boarding schools. When I got home from boarding school, my grandma told me that she had spent a night in my room. She had laid down to go to sleep, and suddenly heard a cranking noise. She said she remembers thinking to herself, "Please don't start playing music." And then my music box started playing. She said she bought a lot of different incense and played a special prayer on repeat for days and basically prayer bombed the whole house. When I returned home, my room felt clean, like whatever had been there was gone. Safe. I stopped seeing the orbs as much. I never played with a Ouija board again, but I do love the designs. I have a Ouija board mug and a Ouija board mat on my dresser. I like the symbol and am not afraid of them, but I will never use one again. I have been tempted through the years to try again, hoping that maybe being better prepared I can have a safer outcome, but I just don't know if I want to take that chance of opening a door to any stranger knocking. When I was around 12, maybe 13 years old, I'm 24 now, I was staying at my dad's house for the weekend. We watched movies and ate junk food, a usual occurrence when I got to see him. My brother was also usually with us, but this time he was staying with a friend that night. I decided it was time for bed around 11 that evening. I went for my routine, getting ready for bed. He decided that it was time for bed around 11 that evening, and I went about my usual routine, getting ready for sleep. I laid down and tried to pass out. I was restless this night for some reason, just feeling completely uneasy. My bed used to be vertical to the door with my feet closest to the door. I always used to sleep with my door open. I guess it gave me some comfort being able to see half of the entrance to my dad's door, knowing that he wasn't far away. Anyway, as I said, I just couldn't get to sleep, and frustrated, I laid there staring at my ceiling for a moment, and then felt as if someone were watching me. I shifted my eyes to the doorway, and a pitch-black figure was standing there, its head almost touching the top of the frame. I've never had an issue with sleep paralysis, and never have had it since, but then, in that moment, I could not move. All I could do was look at this tall figure that stood there, staring at me. Tears began to flow down my cheeks, and my heart felt as if it were going to beat out of my chest. I managed to barely whisper, "Dad?" And it turned its head sideways at me as if it were confused. I began hyperventilating intensely, which must have woken my dad because he came running into my room, and as he came through the door, the figure dissolved, as if a breeze came by, and it went away with it. My dad held me as I cried. I slept in his room that night, and for the rest of my stay there until I went back to my mom's. This event shook me to my core, and to this day, I cannot and will not sleep with an open door. I still have a deep feeling of fear, and almost want to cry when I picture that thing, and remember that night. I'm a corrections officer at a county jail in northwest Alabama. I work a 12-hour night shift from 1800 to 0600, 6 p.m. through 6 a.m. Most nights are calm and not much happens from 2200 through 0500, 10 p.m. through 5 a.m. And other nights, you're moving non-stop and police officers are constantly bringing people in. You have a lot of DUIs and junkies on the weekends, and then anything from an FTA to the occasional murder throughout the regular work week. Anyways, like I said, most nights are calm, meaning that hours feel like days, and sometimes a single shift can make you feel like you've been here for weeks. But sometimes, those calm nights are not really all that calm. We have 2 holding cells in the front of the jail used to house inmates that have been recently booked in, and are waiting to see the nurse for screening before going to Gen Pop. We have another room up front that we call the pink room, due to the walls and ceiling being painted a hot pink color because a former sheriff thought hot pink was a calming color. Everyone hates this room. It's our drunk tank, equipped with a camera for observation and a flushable drain in the floor for any liquids that might come out of someone, if you know what I mean. One night after lights out, when everyone was asleep, I heard a loud bang in one of the holding cells, like someone was hitting or kicking the door, which would have been a normal noise if anyone would have been inside one of them. But my partner and I had moved everyone out of the 2 holding cells just a few hours ago, and no one else had come in that night. I thought it might have been the guy we were keeping in the pink room for medical observation, but when I looked over at the monitor for the camera in there, he was sound asleep on his mat on the floor. I went over to the doors of the holding cells to investigate. I lifted the heavy curtains on the windows so that I could see into each one, but there was no sign of anything. I figured I was just hearing stuff since that noise is so commonly heard at all times of the day or night. I went back over to my desk and sat down. It was about 02:45 when I heard that noise, and it was completely silent until about 03:05. I started hearing the noise it makes when a door is unlocked from the control room. From the control room, you can unlock or open any door in the facility except for like 3 that you need an actual key for. There's a door right behind the desk that I sit at that leads to the kitchen and rec yard. That was the door that sounded like it was unlocked. I radioed my partner, who was in the control room, and asked if she had unlocked this door. She said that she hadn't touched the computer since I asked her to let me outside to vape like 2 hours ago. Again, I thought it was a common noise to be heard, the silence is playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again, except this time it sounded like the front door. I looked over at the monitors for the front door and saw nothing, but on the monitor for the pink room I could see the screen start to get fuzzy, like static. Then it was completely black for a few seconds. When the camera came back on, the inmate was sleeping in the exact same spot. But everything he had in there with him, his cup, shoes, blankets, was all scattered across the whole room. I would have heard him moving and throwing things, but it was completely quiet for those few seconds when the camera was black. After that, I decided I didn't want to be alone anymore. I went to sit with my partner and started telling her what was going on. After I told her about the doors unlocking and locking and about the guy's stuff in the pink room, she just laughed and said, "Must have been Christine." My partner has been working here for 5 years now. She told me that Christine was an inmate that had died in the old jail next door, and that the reason she haunts this jail is because the buildings are connected. She told me about numerous things that have happened while she was on shift, including actual sightings of the ghost she calls Christine. She said that Christine has gray hair down to her shoulders, and that she's wearing a nightgown. She also said that Christine can be seen walking down hallways on the cameras, inside the cells with her hands on the bars looking through them, and that sometimes you can see her face from the windows outside. This story takes place during the late summer in the 1960s in Iowa in a very small farming community. My friend's great-grandpa, Bob, owned a farm out there. He had acres of corn, wheat, potatoes, etc., but corn was his main crop, so he had a huge cornfield. It was around 2 a.m., and his grandfather couldn't sleep, so he went outside to get some fresh air. While outside, he noticed something that looked like a child walking around in the cornfield. So Bob ran back inside and grabbed his double-barrel shotgun and woke the farmhand for backup. They combed through the cornfield in an attempt to find whatever was running around out there. After a while, they still couldn't find anything, so Bob told the farmhand to go back inside the house while he stayed on the porch to watch his cornfield. Then, as he looks at the gravel road between his yard and the fence line that led to the cornfield, standing on the road was a little girl around 6 years old or so, and she was wearing a white dress that made her look like she had just gotten out of church. Bob thought that his mind must have been playing tricks on him, so he tried to lay down on the couch to rest, but also stay somewhat alert. However, not even a minute after he laid down, he heard a knock on the screen door. He walked up to the door and slightly cracked the main door open. He saw the little girl and asked, "May I help you?" The little girl said, "Mister, I'm lost, and I don't know where my parents are. Can I come in the house and use your telephone?" Bob felt uneasy, and told her that he could get her a glass of water and that he can call her parents for her if she gave him the number, but he didn't feel comfortable allowing her in his home. He felt something off about the little girl. However, the little girl insisted to be the one to call and talk to them. And Bob said, "Young lady, it's 2 a.m, and I don't feel right letting a stranger into the house, little girl or not." The little girl started to get agitated and said, "I'm not leaving until you let me in to use your phone." Startled, Bob told the little girl that he was going to call the police to come pick her up so that they could keep her safe and find her parents. He closed the door to go and call the police, and he heard someone punch the door like a grown man. He walked back and cracked the door open again, but when he looked, he realized that it was still the little girl, and that she was the one who had punched the door. But when he looked at her this time, she didn't have any eyes. Instead, she had pitch black orbs instead of eyes, and she said in a deep voice, "Let me in." Bob grabbed his shotgun and pointed it at the little girl and told her no and to go away. After this, the little girl looked right into the barrel and then back up at Bob, smiled smugly at him, and giggled before she ran back into the cornfield and disappeared. I was around 12 years old, and me and my friend were in the mountains. I can't recall the name of the village, but it was situated in the Czech Republic. We were on a hike and stumbled upon an old military station or bunker, just left there after World War II. We went home for flashlights and came back just before the sun was out. We went inside and found that it had like 2 or 3 floors underground, maybe more, with a 40-meter well full of frozen water on the ground floor. We decided to go down and explore. First floor, there was nothing unusual, just some empty concrete spaces. We went another floor down, and I saw some things on the ground that looked like dead rats from a distance. I laughed it off and went to take a closer look. They were bats, about 10 of them, just lying down, dead. They weren't like violently smashed or anything. There was no blood. It was as if they were just sleeping, not even rotten or decaying. I poked one with my foot and the thing just rolled over. I started to get a little scared, but eager to explore further. My friend was basically halfway up the stairs at this point, nervous laughing, saying, "Yeah, we should really go, I have a bad feeling," or something like that. I was almost pulled to continue exploring. Half of me knew that it didn't feel right, but I ignored my friend and continued on. I was almost there, and I suddenly got sick in my gut. That feeling that's screaming in you, the adrenaline. I took another couple of stairs, shining with my flashlight ahead, and then I saw it. I scanned the whole floor, seeing the stairs that went even further below collapsed, so no getting further down, and as I looked across the room with my flashlight, there was a spot that it could not illuminate. In the middle of that spot, there stood the shadow of a man. The flashlight's beam just couldn't get through the form of it. It ate all of the light. I then realized how cold that it had become. I could see my breath. I was staring, paralyzed, for what seems like minutes, but was probably only a couple of seconds. The shadow got a little closer as I blinked. No need to say, I bolted like I never did before, not even caring if it was behind me or what it was. Just running for my life. I got to the entrance and my friend was looking at me horrified, and I just told him to run while rushing past him. We sprinted for about 5 minutes, then confirmed that yes, we were still alive. When we got home, he told me that he had seen something in the corner as I ran past him, so it wasn't just me. His father told us the next day that a lot of soldiers had died there, and there's even an army museum nearby. So was it the ghost of a soldier or a shadow person? During the summer of last year, I was visiting my family at my grandma's house. I met up with my cousins and we decided to take the day to go out, eat, and catch up. After countless conversations regarding how my grandmother was still extremely religious, Muslim, we reflected on how we turned out not to be so religious and laughed. Until we had the brilliant idea of playing with the Ouija board in my grandma's living room, where, mind you, she had a chandelier that played 2 small verses from the Quran every time it was turned on. When we went back to the house, it was already nighttime, but we decided to wait a little longer before we began. Meanwhile, out of curiosity, we asked our grandma about the Quran lights. She said that her uncle had installed them about 6 years ago and that they had stopped working, reciting the verses, not actually lighting up the place. About a month after he bought them, and she laughed it off. Later, when we found that the living room was vacant, it was our perfect chance. We turned off all the lights and settled around the table where we placed the Ouija board and everything. We began the process, following the instructions carefully. After about 15 minutes of nothing, we decided that the Ouija board didn't work, and that we didn't have the true paranormal experience that we wanted. It was our first time playing, or trying to. We closed it up and I got up to go turn the lights back on, and the second I did so, the chandelier started reciting holy verses of the Quran. I froze in place and stared at my cousins, who looked just as shocked as me. I turned the lights off immediately and got out of the room while one of my cousins rushed to take the Ouija board out of the room as well. One of my cousins said that this is a warning from God, that a spirit had entered and that the Quran was pushing it away. I didn't believe him, but we turned the lights on again, and that time the verses didn't play. I thought it might have been a coincidence, a creepy one, but a coincidence nevertheless. My cousin grabbed the Ouija board and stepped back in with it, and she turned on the lights, and again the chandelier recited the verses. This time she looked at me and said that there was no way that it could be a coincidence. We all agreed that we wouldn't mess around with it again, and we threw out the Ouija board the next morning. The chandelier never recited the Quran again, and we never told our grandma about it. Last night I was turning off all of the lights and getting ready for bed. I just had my flashlight from my phone to do some tidying up in the kitchen. I turn it off and go walk into the bedroom. Across from the kitchen, in the living room, there is a shadow. This was something that was different from the usual, as it clearly caught my attention. It was something that looked like a long shape peering in from the upper right side of the window, as if it was a long neck or just some weird shape, definitely abnormal. I was genuinely afraid, and kept turning the lights on and off to see when I could see it. It was only when it was completely black inside, and the street light and neighbor's porch lights were slightly illuminating the window. I tried to look out, but could only see myself in the blinds, and it really freaked me out. So I left the lamp by the window on, and after debating, I told myself not to wake my partner up because realistically it's nothing, and what could it be? I mean, we're on the second floor. It seemed really close to the window, and it wasn't moving. I'm not one to believe in paranormal activities. In fact, every time I watch scary YouTube videos that claim to be true and have paranormal shadows or movements, I instantly think it's not true and get annoyed. Walking tonight with my partner, I remembered the situation from last night. I saw nothing on the outside that would show through the window and create the shape that I saw. I quickly went inside with him to see what I could see from the inside with all the lights out again. I was expecting to see it there, and that it was something that I just never noticed before. But it was gone. The window looks completely normal, and the lights outside are the same as they always are. I'll never know what it was, and next time I will definitely be waking up my partner if I see it. When I was like 13, my mom and her boyfriend had to go to the hospital, and no one would be able to get my brother to the bus stop the next morning because they had to stay overnight. So, I got to miss school the next day to take my brother. After I made sure my brother got on the bus, I went home and cleaned and did random stuff like a 13-year-old would do. It was around 11:45 when there was a knock on my door. Thinking it was the mailman or a neighbor or something, I opened the door and said hello. There was this kid. He couldn't have been much older than me at the time, but he had bangs that were covering his eyes, which I found weird because it was like 107 degrees out. So this kid was super still. Like, I thought that one of my friends put a mannequin there and ran away or something. But then it spoke. It sounded like a robot or something. It was like it was programmed to say this. My mother said to ask someone for a phone in fear that I get lost. Do you have a phone? At this point, I was crapping my pants because 1, I'm a 13-year-old girl, and this older boy was dressed like a burglar and at my door with half his face covered. 2, for some reason, I just couldn't look away. I felt like if I moved or said anything other than yes, that I would explode. And 3, I saw 2 other boys around the same age standing in my driveway dressed exactly the same way as the one in front of me. Baggy jeans, dark hoodie, and scruffed up Vans. I began to stutter and shake my head. It was the only thing I could do. I finally got out a no and then started to close my door, but he put his foot in the way. Then the 2 others started walking up, and I was going, hell no. I grabbed the bat by the door and threatened him. If you don't leave right now, I'll kick your ass and then call the cops. I shouted loud enough so that at least one of my neighbors could hear, I hoped. Now, I was this short girl with SpongeBob pajama pants on. I was in no way intimidating. Then he moved his foot and stepped back into the middle of the other 2 perfectly. Then the far right one said in the exact same tone of voice as the first, I'm sorry to bother you. I'll just come again later and ask. Internally, I was planning my funeral. Just as I was about to close the door, the first one smiled and looked up. And that was when I saw that they had black eyes. Then the other 2 looked up, and they were the same. I was like, nope, and slammed the door shut, then called my neighbor, who was this big-ass 20-something-year-old dude. He ran over and looked for them all around my house, but he said they were gone. When I told my mom all of this, she didn't believe me and said I was lying. Said me, the girl with absolutely no social life, who was afraid of her own shadow, was lying. This is a short story. I was maybe 4 or 5 at the time. It was November or October. I'm assuming it was October because that day my dad and I had bought pumpkins for us to carve for the first time, according to my memory. Before we began carving, my uncle and I were in the backyard. My sister and one of my cousins were playing in a pile of leaves beside me next to a tall green pine tree, and my uncle went inside to grab a frisbee for us to catch, and a camera to take a picture of us playing in the leaves. I remember when my uncle went inside, I turned around to look at the beautiful trees. There was another apartment complex behind our own. I remember the sun had started to set, and the golden rays had coated the green, freshly cut grass on the ground. I also noticed a young woman in a white gown in the yard across from me. She was bent over, and she was putting a flower into the jacket pocket on a little boy who was holding a white pillow. My uncle came outside, and I asked him, "What is that lady doing?" He smiled and said no one was there. He called over my sister and my cousin and snapped a pic of us. I instantly forgot about the lady in the white dress. Years had passed, and I had grown into a young woman. I had moved in with my boyfriend, and as time passed, it came time for us to move out of our apartment. As I was packing, I noticed a box that my dad had given to me when I met my boyfriend. I didn't open it until that time. It was pictures of my family, old clothes I used to wear when I was a little girl. I opened a photo album and looked through it. Then I looked more in the box, and I found a photo, the one my uncle took of me that day when I was a little girl. In the background, within the golden setting sunlight, I saw a woman in a bride's dress. I saw her features and her outline in the sunlight, but only in the sunlight. She looked happy, and she was bent down with both of her hands together holding something. The rest of her body didn't show up. I took the photo with me and visited my uncle, and as we sat down I pulled out the photo and looked at it for a second. I wondered if he would even remember. I then mustered the courage to ask him if he recalled that day. He faintly did, and I showed him the photo, and he smiled, remembering the days when we were all just little innocent kids. I pointed at the sunlight and asked, "Do you see it too?" He looked closer and said, "The woman?" I said, "Yeah. Do you remember when I was a kid and I asked you about the woman in the white dress, and you said that no one was there?" He replied, "Oh yeah, I see it. It must be a ghost." Anyway, that was my little short story. Earlier today, I think I might have seen something, but I don't know. This happened a few hours ago while I was outside mowing my lawn. Quick layout of my yard. When you walk down my driveway toward the street, if you look to the left, you'll see a dead end, and if you look to the right, you'll see a big tree that you couldn't see through. This is relevant. Now, on to what happened. I was mowing the lawn inside my fence, and when I finished that, I went over to the part of my yard that was outside of my fence. After I finished mowing, I looked to the right and saw a pair of legs on the other side of the tree. All I saw was legs, because I couldn't see the person through the trees. But their legs were all black. Like I couldn't make out any features. I couldn't see any pants or shoes. It was just all pitch black. I'm confused, and so I try walking around the tree to see who it was, but whatever it was ran away. It only took me 2 seconds to get to the other side, but as I said, whatever it was gone. I live on the corner of my block, so there's nowhere that a person could have hidden that fast. I've never believed in the paranormal or had any sort of experience, but I really can't explain what happened. Anyone who's had a similar experience and could possibly give me an explanation, I would appreciate it, because I'm still confused. I work in an Alzheimer's unit. Most of the residents don't stay around for very long because they're on hospice, so basically I barely get to know them, and before I know it, they've passed away. One resident we had did not have dementia, but schizophrenia. Her sister stuck her in there as more of a convenience for herself rather than considering her sister's mental health. The resident was extremely bright and remembered silly things that even I couldn't recall that had happened. Once COVID hit, she decided life wasn't worth living, and that she would never get better. She starved herself to death. It was heartbreaking, and she suffered many delusions and manic episodes during her last days. Nothing out of the ordinary had happened the month following her passing, until the fire alarm went off out of nowhere during lunch. My coworker and I immediately went to guard the outside doors since they would unlock automatically once the fire alarm was triggered. We assumed it was another drill and were annoyed that it had happened at such a busy time of the day. On my way to the back door, I popped my head into each room just to make sure that everything was clear. When I came to that empty room, the minute that I opened the door, it was frigid. I assumed that it was normal since the room was empty and thought nothing more of it. I stood by the back door and waited for the alarm to stop. My boss came back with a concerned look on his face and told me that the alarm system said that it was coming from the room where that resident had just recently passed. I explained to him that that would be impossible because I had just checked and there was no sign of a fire. The alarm continued to go haywire for another 30 minutes, even when shut off. It was extremely bizarre. Afterward, I had asked out loud if it was our resident who had just passed, and it felt like a warm bucket of water was dumped over my head, and I couldn't resist the urge to cry. The kind of crying and sobbing that hurts your entire body. Sometimes she opens the fire extinguisher box to remind me that she's still around. You need a key and a strong arm to crank that box open. Anyway, I found it open again today after doing rounds, and was reminded of this experience. I was around 7 years old when this encounter happened. I was visiting my aunt and uncle's old house for dinner and a movie at their place. They reside in this town about 1 hour west of the city that I live in. It was around 10 p.m. and the sun had set. Darkness permeated the outdoors. I remember laying down on the couch watching a film, but I was half asleep. Before I intended on sleeping, I felt the urge to go urinate, so I made my way to the hallway leading to the bathroom. This is when things started to get weird. The hallway in the house has 2 doors on the left-hand side, and 2 doors on the right-hand side, followed by the bathroom door, which is straight ahead. The first door on the left was for storage, the second being my aunt and uncle's bedroom. The first door on the right led to the basement, and the second to the guest room. Before I made my way to the bathroom, I had the urge to look inside my aunt and uncle's bedroom, and I was in complete shock at what I saw. There was the silhouette of a slender figure dressed in what appeared to be an all-black dress suit, although it could have been anything, as this figure was darker than the darkness surrounding it. The thing was nearly 7 feet tall, but was not wearing a hat, and I couldn't make out any facial features. There was no way it could have been my family members, as they were all in the living room still watching the movie. As I was standing there in silence, the figure barely budged, and I just went on to do my business. As I left the bathroom, I looked back to see if this figure was there, and sure enough, it was gone. I bolted down the hallway and plowed my face into the pillows in fear. When my family asked why I ran into the couch like that, I mentioned that it was because I saw a ghost or something. They didn't think much of it at the time, thinking that kids, just have their imaginations. But I know what I saw. My strange experiences started 4 years ago when I was in my room trying to sleep. It was 2 a.m. and I was bored out of my mind. I had a projector that showed me the time. Important. The anti-burglar alarm was on. My family was asleep. I sleep in a room next to the hallway door which leads to a living room. I heard the door open and the projector stopped working. It started working when I blinked. The day after that, it was around 2 a.m. again. I noticed something heavy sitting on me. It went away after a while. I had my head covered by my sheets, so I couldn't see what it was. Those days I saw shadow people out of the corner of my eyes. The worst one was when I was in the shower. I looked in front of me, and something pink just sped up in front of me in the air and vanished right into a wall. The happenings just went away after that, for a while. In the summer of 2017, I was sitting on my bed after lunch. I noticed the air around me felt thick and heavy, and I said, "Something bad will happen." It was August 17th, 2017. The day of the Barcelona terrorist attack. It was around 1500 hours when I said it. For some reason, those 2 hours until it happened felt like seconds. 2019. I'm back from my trip to Norway. I was taking a photo of a book that I had bought there when I saw a black orb while I was aiming at the book. I thought it was a sock. The ball vanished when I took the photo. A bit before going on my trip, I had been practicing soft combat with a few friends when part of the cardboard shovel I was hitting a friend with just vanished. No one else noticed. I had some more experiences with vanishing headphones and chargers, but nothing else. My most recent experience started a month ago, the day when high schools in Spain had to close because of the coronavirus. I was on my way home, and I had the bright idea of reading a prayer in a dark magic book that I own. A prayer against evil spirits. Bad idea. I own a few Solomonic books, and one of them warned against using black magic because the effect would be reversed. Since that day, strange things have happened to me. No shadow people, but what looks like shadow rabbits hopping into my walls. I see them out of the corner of my eye. I also saw a silver one. A huge crow vanishing into a tree. I mean huge, the size of a bike. A black iron bar floating near my window and then vanishing into a tree. I've also spotted what I think was a UFO. And they get weirder. 2 days ago, I was doing some work in my room and I saw a pair of shoes outside my window moving at a great speed. It was not my family. They were in the kitchen, quite far away. I checked again. No shoes. And just yesterday, my family heard me laughing in my room when I was working on something important and not laughing at all. I've been reading a book called Other Side Picnic about urban legends lately, so maybe it's affecting me. Another strange thing was the knocking on my window a few months ago. I heard it in my room and in the room where my parents sleep. It woke me up, but they didn't notice. It couldn't have been the wind. It was a calm day. It couldn't have been branches, as the trees are very far away. I was home alone on Thanksgiving. It was 2015 around evening time, and I heard some knocking. Being in a festive and playful spirit, I opened the door without looking, and automatically felt a deep sense of regret, sort of like a literal, oh shit, moment. I didn't know where it was coming from until I actively started trying to place what was wrong with the situation, and that's when I realized they didn't have any whites in their eyes. For a second I thought, isn't Halloween over? And was confused until the oldest boy made eye contact with me. And that's literally when I felt like I was staring death in the face. They wanted to come in, and the way they spoke made it seem like they knew what I was thinking and were actively mocking my helplessness. I slammed the door on them, turned all my lights on, and started watching TV while they stood outside and would occasionally knock. I felt like I lost a good 6 hours of time because I don't even remember when I fell asleep or what I was last watching. I remember when I first sat down, Gabriel Iglesias was playing, but I don't remember anything. When I woke up, it was around 2 a.m., and the lights were all off, and there was only static on the TV. I have Dish Network, and there were no power outages in my area, and I don't get static if Dish were to go out. I would get a channel listed as an HDMI and a black screen, or it would be the introduction screen where it would show two people talking about the features of Dish Network. Also, if the lights went out, they would come back on. I had to literally switch the lights on and off a few times for it to work, but no one was home. After that, I would occasionally see them outside, and every time it would be pin drop silence, and my lights would occasionally go out or something would lose power like my dish. One time my phone that was at 63% dropped to 1% in 5 minutes. After a few months of being afraid of every knock, I decided to call an imam to bless the house. I also saged the house and brought a lot of different surahs, psalms, to put in every room, including the bathrooms. Since then, the visits have stopped. However, a few months after that, I remember hearing a blood-curdling scream and a banging sound on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw nothing. A few months ago, maybe 2 or so, my mom and I heard a banging coming from the front door, and same thing. No one was there. I don't know if it was them, or something coming back, or just kids playing a prank, but I was so terrified. When I was younger, my mama would leave me home alone with my older brothers. As soon as she would leave, they would pull out a hidden Ouija board and play around on it. Of course, I wasn't allowed to be part of the game. I was probably around 6 or 7, and they were in their late teens. I can remember so vividly these memories. Mama left, and the boys went into a bedroom off the kitchen where the board was hidden. They closed the door behind them, and I was left watching cartoons by myself in the living room. The bedroom door had a gap under it, about 1.5 inches tall, and I would sometimes quietly go lay on the floor and watch them play with it through the gap. I can remember them making contact with a spirit one night, and they asked its name, to which it replied, Tobias. Each time they played after that, it always seemed to be Tobias reaching out. For about a week they conversed with this spirit, and nothing out of the ordinary seemed to come from it. However, one night, as I was watching them, the board started talking about me. My brothers would always write down the things being communicated and read them aloud, which made it easy for me to eavesdrop on them. As I lay there on the kitchen floor looking under the door, the game became active and my brothers started writing. I saw both of them make eye contact and look at each other, confused. My oldest brother said, "It said we are being watched?" As they looked around the room, I snuck back to my cartoons. They opened the door and checked on me, then went back into the room. I crept back over to watch some more. This time, the board used my name. I recall my brother saying, "It says Bianca needs to go away." I could feel the blood leave my face. I knew my brothers hadn't seen me watching. I got up and pretended to be sleeping on the couch, and eventually just actually did fall asleep there. I was awoken in the middle of the night by a strange sound, kind of like the sound a cat makes in its throat when it's mad. I sat up and cleaned the sleep from my eyes. After sitting there in the dark for a moment, it seemed to go quiet in the house. I was getting ready to get up and go to the bathroom, but I felt unable to stand, almost like something was pushing down on my shoulders. Then suddenly, it was like I was in a wind tunnel. I remember Mama's sheer curtains were whirling around, and it felt like they filled the room. I felt so dizzy, and then it just stopped. I don't remember going to sleep at all, but I woke up on the same couch, and it was daylight outside. I have never spoken about this to anyone, but the story doesn't end there. My brothers continued to mess around with the board, which I was no longer wanting to be around. It got to the point that weird things were happening to them, too. They would talk about it amongst themselves, and I would play oblivious. One night, my brothers walked out of the bedroom with a rolled-up sheet and scissors. They told me that they would be right back and walked out the door. The next morning, I learned that the board had said some things that really frightened them. They took it down the road to the old iron bridge near our house to cut it up and throw it over into the water. We were all sitting in the kitchen eating breakfast when we heard a loud crash outside. We ran out to see a car had wrecked on the bridge. My brothers were sure it was because of the Ouija spirit that they thought they had disposed of the night before. The person who wrecked happened to be a person that my brother went to school with. He told my brother that he wrecked because as he was driving over the bridge, a demon-like figure appeared next to him in the car. He later found a piece of the board in his car, and nobody knows how it got there. As a kid growing up, I dealt with anger problems and would always let my emotions get the best of me, so my mom would always send me off to these residential programs. However, they weren't all that bad. If you did good, you could go on these what they called passes. It's when if you do good, you can come home for X amount of hours. So I was doing good and already had been on a few of these passes, and I got to come home for 48 hours. It was Halloween and me, my mom, my sister, and a couple of friends got together and went to this haunted house. So when we arrive, there's a line of people who are waiting to enter, and I had to take a leak really bad because I had sat in the car for hours waiting to get there. I walked to the side of the building, and there's nothing but woods literally growing next to the building, like there were tree branches leaning against and on the structure. So as I was taking this long leak, I heard something step on a couple of sticks, and I noticed a dark shadow figure on all fours creeping up toward me. It looked kind of like a human on all fours, but this was definitely not a human. Like I said earlier, I've dealt with a lot of problems during my childhood. I didn't even have a childhood, so I was very different from a lot of people in so many ways. I didn't have a big reaction to it. I just kind of watched it and made sure that I wasn't seeing things. I tried to keep an eye on it and called my friends over to where I was to get a look. They were caught up in a conversation, though, and weren't paying attention, so I tried to run over to get them and get their attention, and then run back to make sure this thing was still there. By the time I got them and ran over to the area, there was nothing. This thing had disappeared without a trace. I couldn't even explain to them what just happened. They didn't pay much attention to me after that. A couple of weeks went by, and I just forgot about it and let it be. This happened many years ago, so I don't remember many details, but the experience still feels vivid. It is important to be mentioned that the bedroom where I was has a view to the backyard and the kitchen. So, my story took place at my previous home when I was 10. I was alone with my sister, who was 4 at the time, but later my parents came home after Mass. The TV was on and showing a comedy program, but I wasn't very interested. After some time, I noticed what I thought was a person in the corner of my eye. But at a second glance, I realized it wasn't exactly a person. It was a child with curly hair. The silhouette resembled that, and my reaction was nothing but freak out. I was losing my mind, thinking about going to find out what it was or call someone. My sister was sleeping, so she didn't know about it until I told my parents. After some minutes, I managed to calm myself down and wait in that room until my parents came home. Nobody believed me at that moment. And during those years, we didn't have any cameras or smartphones. Some years later, I found out about shadow people, and my experience fits with the stories told. I don't know what to think about that, but always remember that day, even after I moved out. I'm a die-hard agnostic skeptic with an open mind. I believe that anything is possible, but I want a logical and preferably scientific reason behind that anything. The last 10 days, however, have been absolutely insane. It started when I was a little kid. In my memories, I see kids between the ages of 5 and 11 with solid black eyes and smiles too big for their faces. I had a bad childhood, so I just figured they were added memories by an imaginative mind, because that's the answer that solidly fits my skeptical scientific worldview. Last month, I started seeing a girl. She told me about her experiences with sleep paralysis and shadow people. I explained to her that it was a rational experience caused by being in a hypnagogic state. Then she brought up the Cheshire Cat kids. Her recollections matched mine as a child. It was unnerving to say the least, and she and I spent almost an hour discussing the most minute details about them. Our stories matched. So, she does acid with her friends about 10 days ago, and told me that she stepped outside. A group of 6 of them were waiting for her. They showed her scenes from my life that were my darkest. She described them to me too accurately for her to have heard them from a second-hand source, which would be hard to do anyway, considering that I don't like sharing such detailed information. They then told her that I was going to die soon, and that she should stay away from me. This has put a monkey wrench into one of the most promising relationships of my 25 years. Since that night, I have nightmares of them coming into my room, licking my forehead, and showing me the memories of my past as if they were happening in that moment, complete with smells, sounds, sights, etc. I have written this part off as my subconscious mind reacting with my long-dormant PTSD, but they got more and more vivid. While this is happening, she has been distancing herself more and more. Last night was the weirdest part of the tale, however. I was driving down a windy country road to calm myself, and a pair of headlights flies from around a bend and runs me off the road, almost into a tree. When I looked, however, there was no car, and the headlights extinguished after passing me. I'm chalking all of this up to anxiety-started delusions and possible schizophrenia, but I cannot explain how she knew what she did, and why all of this is suddenly happening. I am right now sitting on my front porch, smoking a cigarette. I cannot bring myself to go back inside my house. There is someone in there. Just over 2 months ago, I moved into a new house after losing nearly everything to COVID. I won't go into details or draw this out. Typing this out makes my eyes well, and every hair on my body stands straight up, but damn it, I saw a human-shaped shadow in my walk-in closet. Am I going crazy? Maybe, but I know that I am not at the same time. This is what happened. I was laying on my bed browsing Reddit, and from the corner of my eye, I caught movement coming from my closet. Within literal milliseconds, I turn and see someone standing inside of it, looking right at me. I flipped out, sprung up, ran out of my room, slammed the door, and grabbed a kitchen knife. I yelled and screamed about calling police, that I had a knife, and basically acted like a scared monkey. No response. After about a minute of yelling and screaming, and realizing that I had left my phone in my bedroom to call 911, I slowly peeked in. There was simply nothing there. Nothing. No one could have gone anywhere. I am pissed and terrified about this. I saw this person. I saw their shape, their movement, their arms. There was a humanoid figure in my closet, and that is all I know. I am a serious skeptic with decades of debunking behind me, but I have a few cases that cannot be covered by SP. Sleep disorders, infrasound, carbon monoxide, etc. One personal account occurred a few years ago after my paternal grandfather died, though this was before I dealt with his estate. I was spending a week repairing the old maternal family Bible, a damp, damaged 17th century Welsh edition, so a tough bit of work, and I went to the living room for a break. On the exact spot I was born, old family, old house, was a fixed pillar of smoke. I was a pipe smoker at the time, so recognized it by color and character, and opened all the windows to clear this mysterious miasma. It didn't move at all, and had a distinct Tonkin bean scent. I couldn't name it at the time. The exact same one that filled the hospital room during final prayers for my paternal grandfather. I'm an ex-Methodist preacher, so that fell to me. The pillar was seen and photographed by 2 others. 3 weeks later, I handled the estate, opened a sealed room, and found a Tonkin-based pipe tobacco tin. I spent 12 years ruling out any way that I could have known that scent. And there was no other way or means that I could know it other than spirits held me at that moment that a life ended and supported me to catalog family history. Simple and odd, but interesting. In high school, my friends and I were messing around with a Ouija board one night. We had done it before, and nothing remarkable had ever happened. We usually did it to try and scare each other or our girlfriends. We all thought it was a joke. That night, there was no one else home except the 7 of us, and we were all together around the board. One of the girls there wanted to try it. She had never done it before. This time was different. The board misspelled some of the words the same way every time. It gave answers that seemed historically accurate for our town, things we never knew or never cared about. Long story short, the spirit claimed it was a 10-year-old boy who had died on the property in the 1800s, and was buried there too in an unmarked grave. My friend's house was on a farm in the edge of town. We were all a little freaked out, because the board had never been so detailed and consistent. However, we were still skeptical, and we were all assuming one of us was trying to scare the rest. Finally, my friend asked if the spirit could do something to prove he was there with us. It went to yes, and then spelled out knock. Then the planchette stopped moving. We all just stared at it silently, and then there was a rap, rap, rap on the window right next to us. The lights were on outside, and there was absolutely no one there. We never touched that effing board again. Last night I was laying in bed trying to sleep. My room is already a nice, cool temperature due to my air conditioner. However, it feels as though out of nowhere the temperature drops 10 more degrees. I find this a bit strange, but I don't really mind it. Then suddenly, I feel what I think is a touch, like something is touching me around my neck and chest, as well as pressure building on those areas. I simply try not to ignore it and go to sleep. The cold and sensations of touch are a mere annoyance at this point, but that's when I saw it. I looked over my bed to the door, and there it was. A large, lanky shadow figure standing there with yellow eyes. It was only there for a second, but it still managed to scare me. Luckily, I was able to sleep, and as a precaution, I now have a bowl of salt in my room, as I hear it repels evil spirits and possibly demons. It's been about 8 months since this incident. I still remember it clearly. It was around 10 o'clock in the morning. My mom was in the bathroom taking a bath, so we can say that I was the only person in the house with my dog. I was feeling thirsty, so I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and my dog followed. When I turned around after drinking the water, I saw a shadow figure. It was completely opaque, pitch dark, and had a full humanoid form. It ran from the gallery in the room that was parallel to me. At that moment, my dog started barking wildly and ran into the same room. I had a pug, and we all know pugs don't usually bark that much, but at that moment, he was barking too much. I froze, wondering what to do, and when I came back to my senses, I sprinted, took my dog, and locked myself into a room. Even after locking ourselves in, my dog was still growling. When my mother came out, we checked the whole house, but we couldn't find anyone. 2 months after that incident, my dog died.